The Missing, J.J. McField in the Island of Memories is the latest game from Swery, the same maniac who previously created D4 and, more notably, Deadly Premonition, a game who, depending on who you ask, is either a masterpiece or steaming dog shit. The Missing was nominated for the Games for Impact Award at the Game Awards last year because of its focus on LGBT relationships, both familial and romantic, as well as its graphic depictions of suicide and self-harm. While it is a puzzle platformer, the story is the reason you'd want to play it. For now, suffice to say the actual moment-to-moment gameplay is lackluster. If you're coming here for challenging puzzles or otherwise engaging gameplay, you will be disappointed. If you're interested in the story, you'll probably still find the middle of the game to be a bit of a drag, but it is worth your time. I'll also note that if you're a member of the LGBTQ+ community, or if you're close to someone who is, then you'll probably get more out of The Missing than I did. Due to its focus on story, the experience of playing The Missing would be completely ruined by spoilers. Because of this, I'll be dividing this video into two parts. First, a spoiler-light look at the game's mechanics, and then an overview of the story and themes. There will be another spoiler warning later on, but if you want to play the game totally blind, then you shouldn't watch this video at all. The Missing is a 2.5D puzzle platformer. There's a lot of games in this genre, but in terms of gameplay, the most relevant comparisons would be to Playdead's Limbo or Inside. Although The Missing is lacking the polish that those two are known for, fans of Playdead would find themselves at home with this streamlined, simplistic puzzle design and light platforming elements. However, there is one element of gameplay that sets The Missing apart from the crowd. The protagonist, JJ, can be horrifically dismembered without dying. Nearly every puzzle in the game uses this mechanic in some way, and later puzzles will build on this idea with different forms of character torture. The way this works, in its base form, is that whenever JJ takes damage, an arm or a leg will be ripped off. Limbs can be thrown to manipulate hard-to-reach objects or used as counterweights for physics puzzles. In some instances, it's necessary to remove some amount of JJ's body just to make her small enough to fit into tight spaces. She can even be reduced to just a head, rolling around, although she still has the ability to jump with what is, I assume, fairly impressive jaw strength. JJ can't die unless she takes damage while as a head, so in most situations you get 4 to 5 free hits before you have to reload a checkpoint. JJ can restore her body at nearly any time, so there's no real penalty for mutilating her. She becomes a silhouette when injured, and her blood is white, so the game isn't overly gory, but her screams of agony can still be a bit unsettling. While macabre, this is an interesting and well-implemented gameplay hook. The game tries to build on this with two other elements, but to largely detrimental effect. First, the game introduces the ability to snap JJ's neck. Upon taking a particularly large hit, JJ's neck will be broken, and this will, for some reason, reverse gravity for her and some physics objects. On its own, this is fine, but unfortunately, it reduces your movement speed significantly, and worse, it causes JJ to trip and fall over on every 4th step. Recovering from this requires a short animation of JJ snapping all of her bones back into place. I guess it's cool the first time you see it, but it gets pretty annoying. This may seem like a minor gripe, but remember, this game comes from the Inside school of puzzle design, meaning that while puzzles aren't particularly complex, unless you use a walkthrough, often the only real way to solve any puzzle is by trial and error. The result is that you will likely have to watch this animation over and over and over again. In my opinion, they should have only played this animation the first time, and after that, play a shorter version or just have JJ heal instantly. They also should have done away with the tripping thing entirely. The other mechanic is burning. JJ can be lit on fire by any convenient source of flame, or electricity. After running around and screaming, you can guide her into flammable barriers and ignite them. She can be put out by water sources, and she's more prone to falling damage. The game doesn't explicitly tell you this, but JJ will never burn to death, and the fire never goes out on its own. So basically, you can take your time with these. The Missing's broader level design is mostly pretty good, running through 1950s Americana-themed set pieces, though there are a couple of areas that are incredibly bland. The puzzles are generally easy and inoffensive. I don't think most people will have any big problems completing the game without a walkthrough, although there are online guides if you need help. The worst parts are when the game makes a serious attempt at platforming. In particular, there's one segment filled with death traps that must be completed entirely as a head, meaning that you die in one hit. While it's not particularly long, it's rather difficult. Not because it's designed to be challenging, but because the controls kind of suck. In most platformers, the height of your jump is linked to how long you press the jump button. Not so in The Missing. Your jump height, as a head, is a fixed integer. Moving left and right takes a very short amount of time to build up momentum, and air control is limited. All of this is more or less fine. The baffling part is that when JJ's head hits the ceiling, which it will because you can't control the height of your jumps, all of your forward momentum is cancelled, and she even starts rolling backwards along the ceiling a little bit. Just look at this. I'm only pressing jump here. The conveyor belt at the bottom is going to the right, but JJ is moving left. The poor control feeling shows the most while rolling around as a head, but it is pervasive throughout the game. Even just turning around always feels like it takes a little too long. You can press B to start crawling under obstacles, but if you want to get back up immediately, you need to press A. If you press B again, JJ will just go prone and you'll have to cycle through. Mind you, I recall only needing to go prone maybe once or twice in the entire game. The game just always feels clunky but still floaty at the same time. Maybe I'm just nitpicking, and to be fair, I suspect some people won't notice, or just won't care. But to me, the game feels so slow and imprecise. Not good traits for a platformer. I can't be sure whether this is the result of budgetary problems, time restrictions, inexperienced staff. Mind you, this is by far the least janky of Swery's games that I've played. But the game is lacking in polish, and this, coupled with the game's short length, I beat it in just under 5 hours, means that a lot of people will have a hard time justifying The Missing's $30 price tag, especially if the story doesn't really hit home. Based on what I've said so far, you'd be forgiven if you thought I don't like this game. Let me assure you, I do, but it's maybe a little hard to understand why without spoilers. If you're at all interested in playing The Missing, then you should leave knowing that it is a deeply flawed experience, but its story, themes, and symbolism more than make up for its shortcomings. That said, it's time to look at the story of The Missing. The game opens with 2 messages. This game was made with the belief that nobody's wrong for being what they are, followed by, this game contains explicit content including extreme violence, sexual topics, and depictions of suicide. The latter is a pretty boilerplate trigger warning, but the former is nebulous, to say the least. Although, based on what I've already said about the game, you can probably guess why it's there. We start off with our protagonist, JJ, and her best friend slash love interest, Emily, getting aboard a small boat with an island in the background. A dramatic voiceover tells us this is Memoria Island, which is covered in artifacts and uses the power of the good old days to restore memories. Or something. It's a great place to go camping. There's a bit of awkward dialogue, which effectively establishes that JJ and Emily have promised to be together forever. At some point, JJ falls asleep and is woken up by the sound of Emily's voice, but now she's talking in that Twin Peaks-style backwards speech. JJ gets up to go looking for Emily, and soon we come across a giant monster called the Hair Shrieker, although we don't learn its name until the end of the game. It's carrying a giant box cutter and is looming over JJ's corpse. Then it chases after Emily. For some reason, it's completely impossible to get JJ to even acknowledge her own corpse. It's almost like she doesn't recognize it or doesn't realize that it's there. Following Emily and the Hair Shrieker, we end up in a field behind a power plant. The field is filled with giant American-style windmills that have apparently been modified to generate power rather than pump water. This scene is gorgeous. In fact, it's the only reason I even bothered finishing the game. After narrowly dodging the only tree in the field, JJ is struck by lightning. On a side note, that lightning strike was actually foreshadowed by this warning sign. There's a lot of signs like this scattered throughout the Missing, and they always warn you about upcoming danger in some way, even if their exact meaning is somewhat dubious. It's a neat detail. JJ, ever unlucky, survives the initial lightning bolt, but is then burnt to death.
Sharks didn't minister that. Major Emerald. Major Emerald. Major Emerald.
That was weird. That was the first of many times that you will see JJ get brutally murdered throughout the Missing. If you're paying attention, it sounds like the Moose Doctor is using a defibrillator. That's important. Soon you'll receive a notification from JJ's phone, a text message from her recently deceased stuffed animal, FK. The initials FK are a recurring motif in Swery's games, although they're of no particular relevance to the plot. For most of the game, FK will serve as an impressively useless character. Towards the end, he'll serve as a means for JJ to tell us her current thoughts and feelings, but for now, he's just kind of annoying. For the next couple of hours, The Missing is relatively light in direct plot development. The game instead fills you in on its backstory by way of text messages. Memoria, in addition to the power to restore a person's memories, can also restore the memory to a phone, apparently. JJ's messages can be divided into 3 categories. The aforementioned messages from FK, messages from JJ's mother and Emily, and messages from a group of JJ's friends and one of her professors. Some of FK's messages are unlocked by playing the game as normal, while others are hidden in secret areas. These are the only messages that JJ actually receives during the events of The Missing. All the others are just conversations that she had before the game's events that are restored to her phone by the island. Because of this, FKs are the most immediately relevant, though at first they mostly consist of JJ telling FK to fuck off. The conversations with Emily and JJ's mom are very important to the backstory and help to explain exactly what's going on in the game. You get these messages by playing through the game normally. Finally, chunks of JJ's conversations with her friends and professor are restored by collecting donuts. I don't know why it's donuts, but there are 271 scattered throughout the game, and you'll need them all if you want the full backstory. I have neither the time nor the patience to get them all, so I won't be going over them in detail, but my understanding is that they provide a lot of insight into JJ's motivations for self-harm. If you really want to understand everything that happens in the story, you'll need to do some hunting. The gist of all these conversations, as I understood it, is that JJ is a hard-working college student who's respected by her professors and her peers. She's in love with Emily and has an overbearing mother with some questionably old-school views on gender politics. JJ is also keeping a secret from her mother. It isn't ever explicitly stated in the messages what that secret is, but I incorrectly assumed that she was hiding her homosexuality. At one point during the story, JJ's mother finds a young woman's clothes in her room and starts questioning her. The meaning of this was entirely lost on me when I was first playing through the game, though in retrospect, this is an important detail. Eventually, JJ's mother reads her diary and learns of her secret. She doesn't take it well and goes so far as to demand that JJ see a counselor to get her back to normal. Toward the end of the game, you come to a clock tower. Emily is getting much more talkative at this point. At the top of the tower, you find Emily, dead. She has apparently hanged herself, and conveniently, there's another noose for JJ. She vents some of her pain to FK and then hangs herself. And then there is a 100-year time skip. No, I'm not fucking with you. The noose breaks and JJ falls, landing in a school auditorium. She partially revives and trudges to the other end of the room where Emily sees her and runs away, terrified. JJ continues down a school hall as phantoms throw shoes and trash at her. Evidently, she wasn't as respected by her peers as I thought. Eventually, JJ finds Emily on the school rooftop, armed with a shotgun. JJ gets shot and then transforms into a monster made of severed limbs. After some to-do, this monster devours Emily. After a few more messages from FK, you learn that Emily is not only still alive, but is in need of your help. JJ leaves the monster in a ball of light, becoming Super Saiyan JJ or something, having finally accepted herself for who she is. The Hair Shrieker then appears and pursues her. JJ runs away like she never has before, and eventually stabs the Hair Shrieker with a lightning rod just as a bolt of lightning strikes it. The screen fades to black, and then we find JJ, back at the campsite we first started in. We return to the field from the beginning, the game goes full Kojima, and we find Emily. Now she's speaking normally. The Moose Doctor comes back, and then JJ wakes up. Turns out JJ's big secret wasn't that she's gay, it's that she's trans. I was wrong in my assumptions. As a result, this ended up being a nice reveal, but one that I suspect many people will see coming. In fact, I'm not sure if it was even supposed to be a surprise at all. The evidence was all right there, it just didn't click for me.
What do you see?
A deer.
Good.
That's definitely a moose, and you need to go to a hospital. Incidentally, because of this scene, I suspect the Swery doesn't know what a moose is, which is pretty funny. So the entire game was a dream JJ was having while EMTs desperately tried to save her life. JJ, due to the difficulties presented by both her family and society refusing to accept her as a trans woman, decided to commit suicide, and was only saved by FK, a real, though inanimate, doll, which somehow stemmed her bleeding. Emily and JJ embrace and credits roll. This game, as you might expect, is absolutely filled with symbolism and hidden meanings. For example, the Hair Shrieker's appearance is based off of a defamatory website made by some of JJ's bullies. It could represent a number of things, like JJ's perceived tendency to push away those close to her, as it does literally chase Emily away from her, or it could represent her fears of being rejected by society. It's certainly no coincidence that it carries a box cutter, like the one JJ used to attempt suicide, and the first time we see it, it is standing over JJ's corpse. The entire game, you're chasing Emily, who I believe represents both, well, Emily, JJ's girlfriend, but also the person that JJ wants to be. The way that Emily thinks of JJ. A version of herself that JJ felt guilty that she could never be, and had to be consumed and destroyed by a monster, itself a representation of JJ's pain and grief. Only by destroying this version of Emily is JJ finally able to accept herself for who she is. Emily could also be a representation of society's acceptance, constantly fleeting, staying just out of reach. Really, there's a lot of ways to interpret this game, and there's a lot I don't understand. Admittedly, this isn't a subject that I'm particularly well acquainted with. I suspect you need multiple playthroughs to really get a solid grasp of everything that's going on. Unfortunately, I don't think I will play through it again. As well developed as the story and themes are, I can't get over the lackluster and frankly irritating gameplay. If you're wondering whether or not the missing is worth your money, it is. Probably. I mean, it's definitely not everyone's cup of tea, and you should know what you're getting into beforehand. Sometimes it's frustrating, sometimes weird, a little goofy, but it's got a serious message. Simply put, it's a Swery game. Perhaps it's Swery's best game.